John entered the room with a confident smile on his face. Carelessly tossing his sunglasses on the coffee table, he was at ease in his perfectly tailored suit and impeccable shoes, exuding an aura of superiority that I knew all too well. Beside him stood suitcases emblazoned with the logos of the most expensive brands. First-class flight to Europe, five-star hotels, the lifestyle I've missed so much, he announced, eyes sparkling. I couldn't hold back a short but hearty laugh. His face immediately darkened with annoyance. "What's so funny?" he asked. "Oh, John." I shook my head with a sarcastic smile on my lips. "You don't even realize what you've just done. We are pleased to welcome you to the Unveiled Emotions channel. Introducing our new short story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, give us a like, and share your opinion in the comments. My name is Emily. I'm 32 years old and I work in cybersecurity. I was married to John for 6 years. Behind his charming facade was a rather questionable character. He was always a dreamer, a great public speaker, a man who made big promises and grand plans. I, on the other hand, was the one who made those plans come true. While he bounced from one crazy idea to another, fueled by hope and persuasive speeches, I provided for our home through my steady career. The warning signs were always there. Constant excuses about not having money, financial secrets, and gaps he never bothered to explain. But out of stubbornness or love, I chose to believe we were building something together, a home, a family. And so it went on until last week, when it all came crashing down. It was late at night, about 2 o'clock. I was upstairs asleep, completely unaware that John was making a mistake, that his eloquent tongue could no longer correct. He waited until I was asleep and took my laptop. As a cybersecurity expert, I usually notice these things, but I never thought I'd have to use these skills in my home. That night, John used my computer to access one of my credit card accounts. He copied the information, took pictures on his phone, and, without blinking an eye, went back to bed as if nothing had happened. The next morning, I realized something was wrong. So I opened my banking app and I saw the proof. Almost $10,000 spent on designer clothes, an expensive watch, and a first-class ticket to Paris. I awed, and the pieces of the puzzle quickly fell into place. Of course, John was behind it, but instead of panicking, I smiled. He had fallen into his own trap. The card he'd used wasn't mine. It was a fake credit card linked to a training program I run at work. It's designed to educate companies and to detect and prevent fraud. Every transaction John made triggered automatic alerts. So here I sit, drinking coffee and looking at the notifications. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. It was the beginning of the end for John, and he didn't realize it. The case was going to fall into the hands of the authorities immediately, and John had no idea that he had just become the perfect target. That very morning, I called my lawyer, Julia. "You won't believe what's happened," I began, explaining the whole situation. Julia, on the other end of the line, couldn't contain her laughter. "Wait, let me guess," she said, still chuckling. "Your husband tried to steal money using a fake card, the same card that's connected to the fraud detection program?" "That's right," I replied. "But he doesn't even realize what he's doing," Julia said with a sly note. "Yeah, he's a real criminal mastermind. Every purchase he makes is tracked." "Have the authorities contacted you yet?" "Not yet, but it's only a matter of time." For the next week, I remained calm. I watched from the sidelines to see how far John would go. A few days later, I found a note on the kitchen table. "Expect me late." I knew immediately what it meant. He was spending the stolen money to live the life he dreamed of, and probably somewhere abroad. Every night I monitored the fraudulent transaction alerts on my phone. Luxury restaurants, five-star hotels, expensive shopping. Every notification felt like a small victory. 3 days after his prank, Adam called. "The federal investigator assigned to the case. We've identified a number of suspicious transactions associated with your account," he explained. "Do you have any idea who might be behind it?" "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "This is my husband." A brief pause hung on the line before he asked, "Your husband?" I explained everything, including the fact that the card was part of a cybersecurity training program. On the other end of the line, I heard a delighted whistle. "I've never encountered anything like this," he said. you'd have to make an official statement. But from what we've already established, he's in serious trouble. I waited patiently for John to finally show up. Nothing seemed to have happened. He entered the living room with the confidence of a man who had just conquered the world, dressed in expensive clothes, carrying suitcases, decorated with the logos of luxury brands. "Thank you for this level," he said with a smug grin. "You've really outdone yourself this time." I couldn't contain my laughter. He stopped, frowning, expecting me to explode with anger. "What's so funny?" he asked irritably. "Oh, John," I replied, shaking my head. "You'll find out soon enough." Throwing his branded rucksack on the floor, he took off his tailored jacket and hung it casually on the back of the couch. "Seriously, Emily?" he asked, already knowing the answer. I leaned against the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in my hands. "How did you think this was supposed to end?" He laughed and tossed his expensive shoes aside. "You were always so strict with money. It's not like you couldn't afford it." I smiled demurely, letting him keep talking. Every word he said was another nail in the coffin lid he was hammering into himself. "So the hours, the flights, the hotels, did you think those were my gifts?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. "Of course," he replied, pointing to himself. "It's time for you to relax and enjoy life." As he went to the bathroom, humming some fake tune, I grabbed my phone and texted Julia. "He's back. Ready to move on?" "Great. I'll let Adam know." All week, Julia and Adam worked diligently on the case against John. Every transaction was tracked. Every purchase was meticulously documented. From high-end clothing boutiques to luxury hotels in Paris, his spending painted an image of a man who thought he was invincible. Adam assured me that a fraud alert involving a counterfeit card had already led to a full-scale investigation. "We'll bring him in for questioning as soon as you signal," he said. In the meantime, he sang in the bathroom like he didn't care, and I felt incredibly calm. For years, I'd let John take advantage of my trust, patience, and financial stability. But now he would finally face the consequences. When he came out of the bathroom in a towel, with a smug smile like he was king of the world, all I could do was smile back. He had no idea what was in store for him. He plopped down on the sofa looking triumphant, as if he'd accomplished some great feat. "You should see Paris," he exclaimed, rummaging through his bag until he pulled out his shiny gold watch. The shops, the restaurants. It was like something out of my dreams. I crossed my arms over my chest and leaned against the door jamb, pretending to be intrigued. "That sounds amazing. Tell me more." He began to detail his luxurious week, with dramatic gestures and unnecessary comments, like the quality of the champagne at some high-end rooftop bar. Every word he said sounded like a confession. He didn't even realize it. Meanwhile, my phone, hidden in my apron pocket, was recording his every word. The recording would soon be sent to Adam. "You know what was the best part?" he said, twisting the watch on his wrist to admire it. "Not one person suspected a thing. Not even you." The next morning, I met Julia at a coffee shop to go over the final details. She flipped through a spreadsheet of fraudulent records, his extravagant purchases, and, of course, the tape from the night before. "It's all set," she said confidently. "Adam's already coordinating with the local authorities to make the arrest." I nodded, feeling the weight of it all. "What happens next?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "He would be charged with fraud, data theft, and unauthorized use of financial accounts. Given the amount, the consequences would be serious. At best, he'll plea bargain. At worst, he'll go to prison." I tried to feel sympathy for him, but then I remembered his arrogance and selfishness that I'd put up with for too long. Later that night, John was lying on the sofa, staring intently at his phone when I heard a sharp knock on the door. My heart raced, but not with fear, but with a strange anticipation. I walked to the door, and when I opened it, I saw Adam and two uniformed police officers. "Good evening, Emily," Adam said in his professional, polite tone. "Is John home?" "Yes, he's here," I replied, stepping aside to let them pass. "Make yourselves at home." John took his eyes off the phone and frowned in confusion. "What's going on?" he asked, settling back on the couch. "John, You're a suspect in several cases of fraud and unauthorized use of financial accounts. And unauthorized use of financial accounts. We ask that you come with us for questioning." John's face turned pale, and all his confidence evaporated in seconds. "No, this must be a mistake," he mumbled, looking at me helplessly. "Emily, tell them it's crazy." I crossed my arms over my chest and tilted my head slightly. "I don't know, John. You've been so busy lately. Maybe you should explain things to them yourself." As the police officers began to read him his rights, John stood up in protest. "You can't do this, Emily. It's a setup. You're my wife. You can't betray me." I laughed dryly and leaned against the door jamb. "Funny, John. I thought husbands didn't steal from their wives. I think we're both going to learn something today." His courage vanished, replaced by despair. "You won't get away with this," he shouted as they let him out. "Oh, John," I whispered, slamming the door shut with a loud click. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the empty space where he had been just moments ago. My heart was racing, but not from fear, but because I finally felt free. He was gone forever. About an hour later, Julia called me. "They've started the interrogation," she said calmly and firmly. According to Adam, John was already trying to get out of it. I rolled my eyes. "Of course he is. Let me guess. He's playing the victim?" "Exactly," Julia replied with a slight sneer. "He claims you gave him permission to use the map. But don't worry. With all the fraud alerts, tracked purchases, and your record, he doesn't stand a chance." The next morning, I got another call from Adam. "We have everything we need," he said. Your ex-husband, admitted to using the card. But now he claims he didn't know it was part of a fraud detection program. He's trying to shift the blame onto you and confuse the investigation." "That sounds like him," I said, leaning back in my chair. "So, what's next?" "We're going to continue the investigation," Adam explained. "He's going to face a lot of charges. And given the amount, the consequences will be serious." "Oh, and about the purchases. The buyer protection program has already reimbursed those transactions. You won't be held responsible for anything." The relief was instantaneous, almost overwhelming. I had finally closed this chapter of my life, realizing for the first time that John would have to face the consequences of his actions. For years, I had carried the weight of John's decisions, finding loopholes in an imperfect system. But when I heard the confidence in Adam's voice, I truly realized the magnitude of my victory. "Thank you for everything," I said sincerely. "Don't thank me," Adam said with a slight smile. "You did brilliantly." John's downfall was swift and catastrophic, just as I had expected. News of his arrest spread among our acquaintances with the speed of wildfire. The image of a wealthy, carefree husband crumbled in just a few days. Daphne, the woman I had always suspected of having an affair with him, had not hesitated to leave him when she learned of the charges. His luxuries were confiscated, flights were canceled, and bank accounts frozen. And now he was cornered. One night, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Emily." The hoarse voice on the other end gave it away. "I need to talk to you." I couldn't hold back a dry chuckle. "John, the only thing you need to do is face the truth." He tried to insist. There was something between desperation and justification in his tone. "I made a mistake, you know? I didn't mean for things to go this far." I interrupted him. My voice was as cold as ice. "You were just trying to trick me. You were hoping I'd be blind or patient enough not to notice." A long pause followed before he whispered, "I thought you loved me." I sighed heavily, feeling the anger boiling up inside me. I loved John. Loved the man I thought he was. But a man who lied, stole, and tried to use me. I could never love him. Before he could answer, I hung up the phone. A week later, Julia called with the news. "He's agreed to a plea bargain," she said. "He won't go to jail, but he'll have to pay back every last cent. Plus, he's been assigned community service." "Sounds fair," I replied with a slight smile. "He's always wanted the good life. Now he'll know what it's like to earn a living and live without money." Julia laughed. "You're handling it a lot better than most people." I was quiet for a moment, then said, "For years I turned a blind eye, put up with his charm and ambition. His absence from my life isn't a loss, it's a gift. A chance to start a new life without the constant shadow of his selfishness. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. In the days that followed, the silence in the flat was almost ominous, yet soothing. Julia came to help me with the last of my paperwork, mindful of her usual practicality. "How are you?" she asked, sitting down on the couch. "Better than I expected," I admitted, handing her a cup of coffee. "Strangely, I don't feel angry. Only relief." She smiled understandingly. "Because you won, Emily. You didn't just get over it, you got stronger." As we went through the paperwork, I realized that the financial compensation from John was a small thing. The most important thing was that I was finally independent. For years, I had put up with the injustice in our relationship, thinking it was better to avoid conflict. But now I realized that a world built on silence and compromise wasn't real peace. A month later, when things had calmed down and I finally felt at peace, the official divorce letter arrived. It was in a modest envelope, too small for something so important. I held it in my hands for a couple of minutes, letting the situation finally settle before opening it. John had tried to contact me several times, through people he knew, with apologies by email, and even a letter full of promises that sounded almost comical. I didn't respond. There was nothing else worth talking about. He had made his choice and I had made mine. From time to time, rumors about his life reached me. They said he was trying to find work, but his reputation had been ruined by accusations of fraud. He had gone back to live with his parents and still seemed convinced that things could be fixed. But I knew his world would never be the same again. A month later, when I already felt like this chapter of my life was behind me, Julia and I met for brunch, which had become our little ritual after John left my life. We talked about everything and she, as always, couldn't help but ask, "What now? What are your plans?" I smiled, feeling an unusual combination of peace and enthusiasm that I hadn't felt in a long time. "To be honest, I'm focused on myself. Work is going well, and I'm thinking of going somewhere quiet. Somewhere in the mountains." Julia raised her glass with a smile. "That's what I like to hear. You deserve that." In that moment, I realized that for the first time in years, I was making a decision on my own. No concessions, no hidden agendas. Just freedom. To live by my own rules, to recover, to travel. One evening, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, enjoying the view of city lights in the distance. My thoughts drifted to everything I had experienced. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the fight for what was mine. These sufferings had taught me important lessons. There was no more anger or resentment in my soul, only gratitude. John's betrayal was a turning point that made me realize my power, stop settling for less, and put my own happiness first. I learned to trust my instincts, to value my independence, and no longer let anyone control my life. I raised my glass to toast under the starry sky. A toast to me, to my new beginning. And with that, I finally closed the chapter on John. I was ready for whatever the future held in store for me, with a light heart and the certainty that the best was yet to come. Did you enjoy this story? Write in the comments below. We really value your opinion.